Good evening, everyone. My name is David Omojua. I am your international tutor and coach for all human resources management program at VAA Global. In the last 4 years, I've been able to train aspiring students who have gone to become HR professionals in various industries and organizations that are afflicted to VAA Global. While we expose some of our students to the core traditional divisions of human resources, we've been able to put them through both the theoretical and practical sessions of these divisions of human resources at VAA Global and the testimonies of their success stories where they've been deployed in terms of their internship or where they have also got job in the course of completing their programs have been astonishing. At VAA Global, we don't just train or expose our students to just these areas of divisions of human resources. We also guide them, we also coach them, we also mentor them to become top-notch HR professionals and executives in all of their endeavors. Some of the areas that we have exposed our students to in the course of their program at VAA Global in human resources. We've looked at the evolution of human resources over the course of the years. We've also looked at recruitment, selection, and placement, the one we refer to as orientation, induction, and onboarding. We have looked at the pre-onboarding, onboarding, and post-onboarding period. We've looked at training and development, or also now otherwise known as learning and development. We've looked at performance management. And in performance management, we look at various tools and apparatus that can help assess of set up very robust performance management programs in any given organization that these HR professionals they found themselves. We've looked at 90-degree appraisal model, 180-degree appraisal model. We looked at 360 appraisal model, 720 appraisal model. We look at objective and key result, that is OKR. We look at SWOT analysis, 5W2H, among others that we have looked at and exposed all our students to in the course of their program at VAA Global. Also, we looked at compensation and benefits, which is one of the core major area, not just only taking them through the differences between compensation and benefit. We also expose them to how to configure a payroll in a given organization. We also consider topic like workforce planning, how to write reports, how to write robust HR reports, how to develop HR metrics and analytics that can be presented at board level this time around so that they can also be part of the decision-making mechanisms in their organizations. Also, we look at HR compliance processes, or I beg your pardon, compliance processes, and especially we look at the labor laws guiding some of the countries some of these our students have been working over years. I mean, we look at the labor law of Nigeria, we look at the labor law of Ghana at some point, the labor law of UK and France, Germany, and US, and all of these countries that these students have been able to navigate themselves into to start up their HR professionals, HR professional career. I beg your pardon for that. Now, what we are doing is to now say, look, for anyone who is trying to join us at VAA Global Human Resources Department or session, you are not just registering for a program like any other program. You are also registering for a program that you will get value for money. One of the top reasons why you need to join us at VAA Global is that just not our programs are not just theoretical in nature, they are also practical, in-depth practical sessions that anyone who hasn't done HR before can easily understand. These are programs and go flying in their endeavors. So today, what I want to do quickly is to make some of our aspiring students and applicants to see or have a glimpse of what we do in our classes anytime we come live to have a robust session with our students. Lest I forget that in all of our classes, they are all live and we allow all our students to contribute, raise questions, not like your traditional school setup where students will just sit down and not do anything or see anything in class. It's always an interactive session. So today, what I'm going to be doing is to take you on one of the core traditional divisions of human resources, and I will be breaking down some of the key topics in some of these area of division. And at the end of the day, I leave you to be the judge. If you come join us at VA Global, then you can say, yes, for me to have registered for human resources management program in this institution, I am sure that I've got value for money. So relax while I share my slide. You're welcome to today's program. So today, I'm going to be looking at a topic, and that topic talks about um, recruitment and onboarding. Recruitment and onboarding. And you know that one of the most essential thing that any organization can do is to hire right. Any organization that do not hire right is going to find themselves in a lot of problems. Problems in terms of recruitment mismatch, problems in terms of recruitment not matching or not adhering to the organizational culture, problems in terms of application or implementation of processes, and at the end of the day, the company is going to lose money. So today we look at that topic and we look at various processes of recruitment, and at the end of the day, we look at the importance of onboarding, which is so much essential in today's work environment. So I'm sharing my slide, and I want you to journey with me in the next few minutes as we look at this beautiful topic together. When we refer to recruitment, recruitment is not just waking up and saying, I want to recruit. No. What is informing the reason why an organization wants to recruit? There must be a reason for recruitment. Over time, I've told students that if you want to recruit, there must be a reason why you want to recruit as an HR professional. And indeed, we recruit for two reasons. One, for replacement purposes. Two, for growth purposes. Sometimes somebody has left an organization, we need to replace the person, or there is a growth, there is an expansion. For example, if the company I work for, or if VVA Global has expanded to another city in Nigeria, for example, we're in Lagos, Nigeria, we have moved to Abuja, or we have moved to Port Harcourt, and we need staff to work for us in those cities, then there is a need for us to recruit. That is expansion, and that is one of the reasons why we recruit. Other than that, it might be for replacement purposes. Also, we can recruit for succession planning purposes. However, there must be a top-notch analysis involved before we can say we are recruiting for succession planning. This we all see as we first define what recruitment is all about. So, by way of definition, I have defined recruitment as the process of searching the candidates for employment and stimulating them to apply for jobs in the organization, or let me say in an organization. So I'm looking for candidates to work in an organization, and I'm also prompting them to be able to apply for a job in that organization. How do I prompt or stimulate candidates to apply for job in an organization? I must be able to do that by showcasing my value propositions or by displaying my company's employer's branding. If I do not have good employer's branding as an employer, it's going to be difficult for me to stimulate. By way of stimulation, there is what we refer to as recruitment marketing. In recruitment marketing, I, as the recruiter, must be able to outline my value proposition and what the candidates stand to gain in terms of joining the organization if I want them to apply for job in my organization. So, by way of definition, I can say to recruit means to search for candidates. I'm looking for candidates and I'm stimulating them to apply for job in my organization. Now, one beautiful thing I always tell my students is this, that the first responsibility of an HR manager is in the market, not in the office, because the 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 competition for talent is right, is top notch. There are few quality talent, let me use that word, in the labor market. And for any organization or for any HR professional to be able to get a top notch candidate, you must go head on in the market. If you will not go to the market to end on, then there will be a problem. So this is the reason why organizations must always aspire to ensure that by way of looking for top-notch candidates to apply for roles and job in their organization, they must know how to stimulate them. So after that, let's look at the importance of recruitment. Like I said earlier in my opening introduction, I said we recruit for succession planning purposes. Sometimes when we do what we call recruitment analysis and we look at our workforce demographic, we realize that probably there is a gap in terms of the age. For example, there was a time in Japan where they realized that there's a gap between their retiring workforce and the aging workforce and the aspiring workforce. So because of the law or the national policy they made that a Japanese must not give birth to more than one child, and that creates a vacuum. So in order to close that vacuum, they needed to quickly accelerate their recruitment policy in such a way that they started bringing in immigrants into their country so that they don't have a working class gap. So also in some organization, if there is no proper recruitment planning, there could be a case where there will be a gap, and that gap can lead to what I call succession planning problem. If not quickly addressed and arrested, then the company may end up having a whole workforce of that organization retire or exit the organization at a go. So there is a need for us to plan well our succession planning if we want to have good continuity in the organization. So that's one of the reasons why we recruit. So again, recruitment is a process which links employees with employer. If I want to get an employee to work for an employer, it is through recruitment that is done. Again, we determine present and future requirements of the organization with proper planning, which means for us to determine what we need in terms of manpower and employees in our organization, we must plan very well. And the only way we can plan very well is when we conduct a recruitment exercise. Again, another importance of recruitment is to attract more candidates to apply into the organization. I've mentioned this earlier. For an organization to be able to attract top talent, the recruitment specialist or the HR generalist in terms of recruitment must be able to get or go into the labor market, attract top talent that can work in a given organization. Also, we recruit for the purpose of increasing the pool of candidates for a job at minimum cost. There are times that we solicit for CVs when we don't have any reason for us to recruit. That is even the best time for us to recruit at a minimum cost. So this is another reason why we recruit. And at the end of the day, so that by the time there is an opening for a particular role in an organization, or there is an expansion in that regard in that organization, we can bring in the CVs and shortlist the right candidate and top-notch candidate at a minimum cost. Also, recruitment helps us to provide quality people, quality individuals, quality employees for an organization. So these are some of the reasons why we recruit in an organization. So what are the processes of recruitment? What are the processes of recruitment? Remember I said earlier that we don't just recruit for recruiting sake. There must be a reason why we want to recruit. Let's look at reason number one. That could be like if we are replacing a staff who has just left the organization. For example, let's say in the finance department, for example, now the finance manager has left the organization, and the finance director or chief financial officer wants to replace that finance manager. The first thing that they must do is to submit a job requisition to the HR generalist or the recruitment specialist in charge of recruitment in an organization. So if I'm in HR, I must receive a job requisition from the hiring manager who needs that particular role to be covered up in an organization at a given point in time. So once the HR in charge of recruitment has received the job requisition, then he must identify the job vacancy. What do I mean by identify job vacancy? He must be able to analyze, is it compulsory for us to replace this person? Are there duplication of roles in the first place? Do we need to replace this position, or do we need to close down this position permanently? Maybe in the first place, when we conducted our recruitment analysis, we realized that the department is over bloated. And if the department is over bloated, then there is a need for us to find a way to reducing the number of workforce we have in that department. So if by natural occurrence, somebody now exited the department, then we can just as well close that role and allow another person pick up that particular task or KPI of the exceeded staff in that department. However, if that job is still of necessity in that department, we must now move to the next recruitment process, which is preparing job specification, which is what we all refer to as job description. Now, one thing I always say to HR generally. So expert in charge of recruitment is they should not fall into the trap of preparing job description by themselves. Every organization have, have has their role, and their roles are specifically customized to the responsibility of an employee in the organization. What I'm trying to say is this, that if an account officer, for example, is in charge of receivable, that receivable function is tailored to the need of the organization. So the HR person or professional in charge of recruitment cannot just go online to just pick a generic job description and throw open the application online. No, he must sit with the hiring manager to prepare the JD and to ensuring that the right job description and requirements and expectations are well spelled out in the job specification or job description. When these have been achieved, then the HR professional in charge of recruitment can now go ahead and advertise the job. Now, to advertise the job, we have various platforms that we can use, online platforms like X, which is referred to as Twitter, Instagram, the company's website, Facebook, Smart Recruiter, and a whole lot of job online job application boards that can be used to advertise this role. Once we now advertise the role, then as we are begin to receive resumes or curriculum vitae, then we begin to manage responses. In some cases, we can manage responses using ATS, known as applicant tracking system, which has been installed to filter the successful CV from the non-successful CV. Or we do this by way of manual shortlisting. Now, when we now move to shortlisting, then we begin to now look at those CV that are aligned with the job description that we have applied, that we have placed online when we were putting the advert online. So by the time we looked at these CVs, we can now determine with the hiring manager the set of candidates that we want to arrange for interview. And once we agree with the hiring manager that these candidates are fit for interview, then we can now evaluate and put them for final selection. So, what are the sources of recruitment that we have? When we want to advertise, what are the sources? What are the places we can get our candidates from? We have two types of sources, both internal sources and external sources. Internal sources can come by way of promotion, if we decide to promote staff. Like I said earlier, by way of succession planning, we've planned for it that at some point in time we need to promote people to either higher level or managerial level. Then that can be a source. By way of transfer, moving one particular staff from one department to the other department, or thinking that we can upgrade people. Sometimes people can be upgraded if we know that they can actually do the job and do the job very well. We can conduct internal advertisement. Sometimes some organizations, especially multinationals, always conduct internal advertisement to ensuring that the right person or the most competent person applying for the job and are taken for the role. Then we can look at retired employees. Sometimes some retired employees just need something to actually while away time and to keep the brain working. So this can work for a lot of startup companies and companies with no too big workforce. Then sometimes when staff of particular organizations are being retrenched. I mean, I remember there was a recruitment I did for a chief compliance officer of an organization, and I've been on that particular role for close to 2 weeks. So somebody one day just told me that in one particular bank in Nigeria, they just sacked their chief compliance officer because they were right in downsizing. They just disengaged their chief compliance officer. I contacted him, and immediately he was happy that he was ready to pick the role, and eventually he was given that particular role. So sometimes when an employee has just been retrenched and you as HR professional in terms of recruitment, we got to know about it. This can be advantageous for us in terms of trying to close a particular role. Then this is my best, which is employees referral. By telling some of our colleagues in the workplace, some of our co-workers that we are looking for a particular role in the organization, a lot of employees can help with referrals. And referrals are always top notch sometimes when it comes to recruitment in any organization. Now, when we now talk about the external sources of recruitment, we look at advertisement. We've mentioned that before. When you advertise on all platforms, all available platforms, both online and offline. Then campus recruitment, that's when we want to bring in management training or graduate training en masse into the organization. We can decide to storm a particular campus at their convocation period or at the time when they are graduating from the school and bring them like green horns. Sometimes some people will say, or some organization will say, look, we want first class graduate fresh from campus, or we want and second class upper, depending on the criteria the organization is using from campus, and this can be advantageous at the point of sourcing for candidates in the organization. Again, using placement agencies. Sometimes some organizations are specialists. In Nigeria, for example, you look at Jobberman, you look at upniger.com. Sometimes you look at Nairaland, etc., etc. You look at Smart Recruiter. All these are placement agencies that they don't recruit, but they can help you place your advertisement for recruitment, and you realize at the end of the day, you can get top-notch a candidate from them. Then we can outsource recruitment to consultants and outsourcing firms. Sometimes some organizations are also there to help recruit, shortlist, and send sometimes top 5, top 7, top 10 candidates to organizations to help source for candidates. Again, through employment exchange. Now, this is almost like a global thing. Sometimes I remember some organizations can contact some institutions or some countries where there may be a need for them to get some particular set of employees or workforce that can come in and plug. Sometimes it can be like global immigration in a particular employment class. So this is another source of recruitment. Then you can contact labor contractors when you need some labor, local, especially for local employees or blue collar job seekers. You can contract some local contractor. Then again, this is another robust way of finding or getting to recruit staff, which is soliciting for applicants when we are not even in need of them at any point in time. So these are the two major sources of recruitment if we want to recruit in any organization. Then we go to selection. Now, after we have search, which is recruitment, we have shortlisted, then we have shortlisted for interview, now want to select. Now, what is selection? Selection is the process of choosing the right person for the right job. selection must be carefully implemented so that the right person is selected for the right job. That can be the right person for the wrong job. That can be the wrong person for the right job. So it's a process that must be carefully carried out so that we can have a match in terms of the right fit for the right job and the right fit for the right culture, which is very, very important when we are recruiting in an organization. Also, selection could be a long process. I said that earlier, commencing from the preliminary interview of applicants and ending with offering contract of employment. So that is very, very important. It's always a long process when we are selecting, because we want to now kind of filter the candidate. We've only shortlisted the candidate based on what they told us through their resumes and curriculum vitae. Now we want to have a kind of interaction with them that will make us determine the right candidate for the right role, and it's through selection, which must be rigorous, must be thorough, that we can actually get the right candidate for the right role. So, what are the importance of a selection process? The importance of a selection process. One, we need to reduce applicant number. It's very, very important for us to reduce applicant number. Sometimes we may have 5,000 candidates applying for 2 roles. We need to find a way to reducing them. And for us to be able to reduce them, we must select them carefully. Number 2 is to help with choosing quality over quantity. A lot of quantity talent are there now in the labor market. It is through a very robust selection process that we can get quality over quantity. Again, through selection, we can reduce cost of training and development. How do I mean? When we select the right candidate, candidate for the right job, then we will train less. We won't train too much. We won't need to say, oh, for example, a candidate has told us that he can use Excel very well. And when we ask him to rate himself, he has rated himself like something like 7/10. Now, if a 7/10 candidate who can use Excel very well is brought into the organization, we expect him to be able to do things like VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, matching, pivot table, macros, and the likes. So if we get the right candidate for the right job and is able to do what we need to do with the use of Excel, I can bet you we won't have to spend too much on training of such candidates. But if we don't get such candidates in place, then it means the company will now need to start training all over again, which is additional cost to recruitment. Again, it is through selection process that we can assess the candidate behavior. If we don't assess the candidate behavior through selection process, then we might bring in the wrong fit for the wrong culture. Then selection process help us avoid waste of time. Sometimes you read some CVs, they are fantastic, but by the time you are speaking to the candidate, you know that this candidate is not even the right person for the job. So it will help us avoid time wasting. Then absence of personal problems. Sometimes when we select, then we can know the right person for the right job, like I said earlier in my definition of selection. So it is through selection, good and robust selection process, that we can select the right person for the right job that can also lead us to absence of personnel problem. So what are the stages of selection process? Candidates who apply are selected. Like I said, you shortlist them. Then for me, I believe there should be an interview panel. Interview panel must, for me, be a minimum of 3 panelists. The hiring manager must be there. The HR representative who is organizing the interview must be there. And another independent assessor, which can be an expert in the field or in the discipline we are trying to recruit a candidate, so that we can have a robust view of of the panelists on with regard to each candidate that has been interviewed. So when we have that panelist configuration in terms of that that I mentioned earlier, then we can have a very good and robust interview process. I am not saying it should be 3. What I'm saying is that it can be a minimum of 3. It can be 4, it can be 5, it can be 6, depending on the capacity of the organization. Some interview panel can just not be panelists sitting together at once. It could be a situation where the candidate is being moved from one panelist to the other, especially virtually. Now that we have a lot of organizations running panel interview virtually, then they can move candidates from one person to the other within the space of 1 to 2 hours, and at the end of the day, the interview is completed. If one person out of, let's say, 5 panelists in that regard did not or do not pass the candidate, it's possible that candidate might not get through such an interview panel. So it depends on the capacity of an organization for the configuration of a panel of interviewers. Then there must be negotiation stage. I leave this to HR, the HR professional in charge. He must be able to negotiate. And then there must be a minimum of top executive chat. Now, it depends on your company's policy to know if your chats stop at probably the manager's level or the director's level or the top executive or the MD's level. Now, it also depends on the status of the role. Some roles don't get to the top executive. It ends with the manager. Some some roles that are being filled can even get to the level of the board. For example, if I'm replacing the MD of a company, that particular role might likely get to the level of the board. So there must be a board chat with the MD CEO. But some roles, like junior roles, can just end depending on the policy of an organization. But I just believe that this is the minimum that can be stages of selection process in any organization. So, what are the basic selection tests that we can put in place for us to get our interview process right? Number one, we can, make candidate right test. If we want to reduce the number of candidates so fast during selection process, we can make them right tests to find out their practical knowledge. Sometimes we can ask intelligent questions, and intelligent questions can be to test their intelligent quotient. Aptitude test question to test their logical skills, mathematical skills, and arithmetic skills. Emotional intelligence question can help us test their behavioral pattern and their ability to function in a team, and ability to put other people in their shoe. Can this person function in a multi-dimensional team? Can this person work with others? Does he have a good temperament to be able to function in an organization? So if we put all this together, that can help. Then their PC skills is very, very important. You don't want to recruit somebody that can't use or cannot even operate a computer in this day and age. So these are some of the criteria we can use in our selection test. Then after the selection test, we now conduct what I call check references and background, or we call it background check, background and references check. So this will help us to get appropriate information on candidates we have begun to identify for a particular role. In some cases, I always advise professionals to always have 3 candidates who could be cross-checked for one particular role, and the top of them will be the first to be cross-checked, or the second of them will be cross-checked, and the third of them like that. Now we want to check the employment history. The reason why I said we must always have them in threes is because one may fail and we don't need to start all over again. We just go to the next person to start the same reference check, then like that to the third person. So what we want to check is to check their employment history. We want to check their residential address, their referees, their educational and qualification background. Some organizations even go as far as doing criminal check, and they want to know if such candidates they have criminal record with law enforcement agencies in their country or in their state, or where their company is resided, or the candidate resides. So this is very, 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 very important. Then after we have concluded our background check and we have identified that the candidate identified for that particular role has carried through this process, then we can now begin to initiate job offer. Then we write the candidate, we give contract of employment. The candidate should accept the job offer, sign the contract. Then we begin to ask the candidate to fill the application form, write official letter, fill the company's application form. Then all the necessary documents and supporting documents that the candidate has submitted can now be put together and placed in a file, so that we can begin to see we are now moving to the next level of our recruitment selection and placement process. And that next level is onboarding. Now, when we come to onboarding is a placement, is defined as a process of assigning specific role to a new hire. But much more than that, we have three stages of onboarding. We have pre-onboarding, we have onboarding, and post-onboarding. We are going to be looking at that in a jiffy. Pre-onboarding are those tools, are those materials, for example, are those necessary information that we need from an identified candidate to be able to, for us to start preparing ground for that candidate to be able to function on day one, day two, or when he resumes in our organization. For example, some candidate might be physically challenged, and there's a need for the company to provide such tools that can aid them to perform optimally in their place of work. So, or when they resume, some can be physically impaired. So if at the end of the day we do not conduct a pre-onboarding process, then there might be a challenge for us to quickly know how we allow such less privileged or physically challenged candidates to be able to function optimally in their new environment. So we must be able to know how to assign specific job to a new hire during onboarding process. Now, the importance of onboarding is, number one, is the function of HR manager. So you must know that you must make sure that your new staff are properly onboarded. And after pre-onboarding, we move to proper onboarding, where you now have your induction and orientation. The HR manager or the HR personnel in charge of that must ensure that everybody must come to play their part at the point of onboarding a new hire. We must not allow a new hire become driven to a level where they become nervy at their first day at work. Sometimes we get to a level where we've seen situation where a new hire is abandoned by their new company on day one. Nobody's attending to them. Nobody is looking at them, and it becomes like a nervous situation for them. Why did I come here? What's happening to me? Nobody's talking to me. But as soon as a new hire resumes in an organization, there must be an appointee of the HR that is coming in to come and speak to the new hire and make them feel free to be able to integrate quickly and on time into the new organization that they found themselves. You know, like I said, it must also help them, the new recruits or the new hire, to settle easily in their job. That's one of the another importance of onboarding in an organization. Then, when we now bring them in, we now need to conduct orientation and induction. So induction is a technique by which a new employee is introduced to the company, policies, practices, and purposes of the organization. Now, we have our practices, the way we do things, our culture. We have our policies, code of conduct. Then our purposes. Our purposes can be our vision, our mission, our core values, what we are known for, our team, our products, and all of the things we are doing that makes us an organization. So we must introduce or expose a new hire to it. It will be unprofessional of the HR professional in charge of induction and orientation not to conduct any induction and orientation for a new staff, because if that is not done, it means you are exposing them to just any form of attack from anybody, both internally and externally in the organization, because they don't have the right information to be able to respond to some of the queries that might come up in the near future. So I would say that it's very, very important to conduct induction and orientation. Then, what are the objectives of induction and orientation? Like I said, reduces stress. Some new hires, they must have over stressed themselves with the thought of how is this company going to integrate me quickly? How does it look like to function in this company? What are the people like in this company? So they become so nervous, and the feeling of insecurity can quickly set in. But if we conduct induction and orientation for them, I can tell you this, some of them just become calm in themselves and begin to see that there is no big deal in their day one at work. Also, induction help us to fulfill the expectation of new employees. Employees, they always have their expectations. What are they expecting? What kind of people are they expecting to see? What kind of culture are they expecting to see? You know, recruitment sometimes is like a black market. And when an employee doesn't see those expectations that they have been told during the interview or selection process there again, then they become stressed or distressed. So at the end of the day, onboarding will help them to quickly integrate themselves and understand their expectation in an organization. Then finally, it makes their work easy. Yes, when you onboard a new hire, they can easily understand their job description, their KPI, and others. Then, what are the benefits of induction? Induction develops a feeling of belongingness towards the organization. You know, I've seen cases where a new staff properly inducted in an organization in 2 weeks integrates so fast that you won't even know that such a staff has just resumed in the organization. That's the power of induction and orientation. So when a new hire is properly inducted and trained in an organization and given a proper orientation, then you see them integrate so quickly into the organization system and culture. Then induction helps new recruits to understand easily company rules. Yes, I've said that before. Work culture and the people. If you don't conduct an induction as HR professional, or you don't have that system in place in your organization, you have to put that in place, because it is through induction that new hires will understand the company rules, work cultures, and the people. If we don't put that in place, then we can drive new hire into a distress mode, and they may just like ask themselves, why am I in this organization? What am I doing here? Why am I sitting here? Is there any way that I can quickly leave this organization because I've made a mistake? And if care is not taken, that will be turned over in such organization. Then, what are the issues we have with now recruitment, selection, and placement? You know, having said all this, that we need to recruit right, select right, and placed right in an organization, what are the issues? Number one, quality of candidates. The quality of candidates or talent in the labor market is becoming challenging for HR professionals to be able to select right. So these are issues, and unfortunately, it is becoming alarming in our society. So we need to be able to carefully select rightfully so that we don't pick quantity over quality. Now, again, employee retention, this is even very, very problematic for organization that is an organization that experience, I beg your pardon, turnover. When you try to recruit somebody in and the person comes in and the person does not stay before the person moves to another organization, there is a problem. So what can be done is only God knows. So these are challenges for HR professionals, because at some point in time, if care is not taken, this can become frustrating, and at the end of the day, the recruitment process can cause issue for the HR professional in the organization. Again, the part that I mentioned earlier, that some organizations don't have strong employers branding, is a big challenge. When an organization has been known notoriously to be very bad place for employees to strive, then there is a problem. They have bad value proposition in the labor market, in the marketplace. To getting candidates, to getting quality candidates can be challenging for a recruiter. So at the end of the day, these are part of the problem. Then compensation, benefit, and working environment. That kind of a place where competitively the salaries or the total compensation package of the employee is not commensurate to what is in the market or what the other competitors are paying for such top talent. I mean, it's going to be challenging for them. If company A is paying 15 naira or 50 pounds or $50, and company B, who is also a competitor, is paying 100 naira, 100 pounds, or $100. I mean, the tendency that candidates want to move to company B is higher than company A. And so if the compensation or benefit or the total package of the of who be employee is not commensurate to what is paid in the industry, it can be challenging for recruiters. Then using data-driven recruitment procedure, that's another challenging issues that we have in terms of recruitment, selection, and placement. Is always challenging when you don't have data to guide you when you're recruiting, especially when you need some high tech or high level roles to be filled. I mean, you want to fill, let's say, an executive director role in a multinational, for example, and there is no data telling us that these are the number of top executives looking for a job at that point in time, knowing fully that such candidates are very, very scarce in the market, or you want to enhance and you don't have enough data to back yourself to be able to tell if there are some of these top executives open to recruitment or moving from one organization to the other, then that's a problem. Then finally, lose soft skill. That's another challenge when candidates cannot use basic tools, cannot write very well, and is poor in managing pressure. I mean, employers can still brush up this, but if it's now too obvious in such candidates, then there can be a problem for recruiter. So finally, in closing, I can say that for us to have a robust recruitment, selection, and placement, we must be ready to conduct a proper review of our recruitment policy, recruitment, selection, and placement policy. If we don't have that in place, then we can't develop one. And if we have that in place and is antiquated or outdated, we need to find a way to kind of, let me say, um, review it so that it can align with the modern trends in the job or labor market. By the way, I want to believe that you've been able to learn one or two things today in my presentation. I want to also say again that for you to be able to understand the nitty-gritty of the various traditional divisions of HR or HR management, or let me say human resources management, please come join us as students in VAA Global. And I can tell you that you will get value for money. There's always a saying by the founder of the school that if you don't get value for money, we will refund your money. And I can tell you that all of our students who have been with us over time, not only in human resources programs and other programs like data analytics, software development, our mini MBA, they have gone out to become exceptional professionals in their field of endeavor. I want to encourage you to visit our website one more time and check out our details. Call our 24/7 hotline and we'll be here to attend to you and to attend to your application needs. Thank you once again for your time. Till I see you in class. Bye for now and remain blessed. Bye.